and illiteracy, among other things.
The Millennium Development Goals, I remember those. They were a big deal at the time, a roadmap for global development.
They were, and they made significant progress in many areas building on that success. The UN launched the Sustainable Development Goals, or SDGs, in 2015. These are a set of 17 interconnected goals that aim to end poverty, protect the planet, and ensure prosperity for all by 2030.
17 goals, that's
Yeah.
ambitious. What are some of the key areas they cover?
They cover a wide range of issues, from ending hunger and poverty to ensuring access to clean water and sanitation, promoting quality education and gender equality, tackling climate change, and fostering peace and justice. It's a comprehensive agenda for a more sustainable and equitable world.
It sounds like a blueprint for a better future. But how does the UN actually help countries achieve these ambitious goals?
They provide a platform for international cooperation, sharing best practices, mobilizing resources, and providing technical assistance. They also work to monitor progress, hold countries accountable, and advocate for policies that support sustainable development.
So the UN acts as a facilitator, a catalyst, and a watchdog, all rolled into one.
A great way to put it, they play a multifaceted role in promoting sustainable development, working with governments, civil society, businesses, and individuals to create a world that's better for everyone.
It's inspiring to see the UN taking on such a crucial role in shaping a more sustainable future. But what about upholding international law? What role does the UN play in that arena?
Upholding international law is another core function of the UN. It's about promoting a rules-based international order where countries respect their commitments, resolve disputes peacefully, and cooperate to address common challenges. It's the bedrock of global stability and cooperation.
So the UN is like the guardian of international law, making sure everyone plays by the rules and upholds their agreements.
You could say that the UN Charter itself is considered a treaty, a binding agreement between nations.
Okay.
And beyond that, the UN has facilitated the development of countless international treaties covering everything from human rights and disarmament to trade and environmental protection. They've helped create the very framework of international law.
So they're not just enforcing existing laws, they're also helping to create new ones as the world evolves and new challenges emerge.
Exactly. And they also play a role in enforcing international law, though it's a complex and often challenging process.
Right.
The International Court of Justice, which we discussed earlier, can settle legal disputes between states. And the Security Council has the authority to take action to maintain international peace and security, including imposing sanctions or authorizing the use of force.
Right. The Security Council has that veto power, which can be controversial, but it also reflects the UN's role in enforcing international law and maintaining global order. It's a delicate balancing act.
Indeed, it is. It's a balancing act between state sovereignty and the need for collective action to address global challenges. And beyond the Security Council, the UN also promotes compliance with international law through diplomacy monitoring and reporting. They also provide technical assistance to help countries implement their international legal obligations.
It's incredible how much work goes into maintaining a rules-based international order. It's easy to take it for granted, but without a system for cooperation and accountability, the world would be a much more chaotic place.
Absolutely. International law is essential for global stability and cooperation. It's what allows countries to work together to address common challenges and resolve disputes peacefully. And the UN plays a crucial role in developing, promoting, and upholding that legal framework. It's a vital part of their mission to create a more peaceful and just world.
So we've covered a lot of ground here, from the UN's specialized agencies to its work in protecting human rights, promoting sustainable development, and upholding international law. It's a truly impressive scope of activities. But where does India fit into all of this? We mentioned that it's a founding member of the UN and has played a significant role in peacekeeping. Can you tell us more about India's contributions to the UN?
Of course, India has been a staunch supporter of the UN since its inception and has actively participated in all aspects of the organization's work. As you mentioned, India has been a major contributor to UN peacekeeping operations. In fact, they've contributed more personnel to peacekeeping missions than any other country.
Right. I recall you mentioning that over 244,500 Indians have served in UN peacekeeping missions since 1948. That's a remarkable number.
It is. Indian peacekeepers have played a critical role in stabilizing conflict zones, protecting civilians, and facilitating peace processes around the world. They've been on the ground in some of the most dangerous places working to build a more peaceful world.
And so they're not just talking about peace, they're actively working to achieve it.
Exactly. And it's not just about the numbers. India has also been a leader in promoting innovative approaches to peacekeeping, such as deploying all-female peacekeeping units, which have been particularly effective in engaging with local communities and building trust.
I find that really inspiring. It shows a commitment to not just maintaining peace, but also to promoting gender equality and empowering women in the process.
It's a testament to India's approach to global engagement, and beyond peacekeeping, India has also been actively involved in other areas of the UN's work, like promoting sustainable development, advocating for human rights, and supporting the reform of the UN system.
What's India's stance on UN reform? We know there's been a lot of discussion about the need to update and adapt the UN to the realities of the 21st century. What are India's views on this?
India has been a vocal advocate for reforming the UN, particularly the Security Council, to make it more representative of the current global landscape.
Okay.
They argue that the current structure, which was established in 1945, no longer reflects the geopolitical realities of the 21st century. The world has changed, and the UN needs to change with it.
It makes sense that the UN should adapt to the changing world. What specific changes is India proposing?
India, along with many other countries, is calling for an expansion of the Security Council, both in terms of permanent and non-permanent members.
Okay.
They believe that this would make the Security Council more inclusive, representative, and effective in addressing global challenges. They want to see more voices at the table, particularly from developing regions like Asia, Africa, and Latin America.
So India wants to see more countries, particularly from the developing world, have a greater say in global decision-making. It's about democratizing global governance and ensuring that the voices of all nations are heard and respected.
Precisely, they believe that a more inclusive and representative Security Council would be better equipped to address the concerns of developing countries and promote a more just and equitable world order. And beyond expanding the Security Council, India is also calling for reforms to improve the Council's working methods and make it more transparent and accountable.
It's encouraging to see India taking such a proactive role in shaping the future of the UN. It shows their commitment to multilateralism and their belief in the importance of the UN as a platform for global cooperation. It's a reminder that even though the UN has its flaws, it's still a vital institution for addressing global challenges and building a better world for all.
I couldn't agree more. And India's active engagement in the UN system is a testament to their commitment to a more peaceful, just, and sustainable world order.
Well, we've covered a lot of ground in this part of our deep dive, exploring the specialized agencies of the UN, their roles in addressing global challenges, and India's contributions to the UN system. But there's still more to explore, isn't there?
There is. In Part 3, we'll delve into the successes and failures of the UN, the criticisms it has faced, and the ongoing debate about reform. We'll also consider the future of the UN and its role in shaping the world of tomorrow.
It sounds like we have a lot to unpack. I'm looking forward to exploring these complex issues further in Part 3. See you all there.
Welcome back to the Deep Dive. In the previous parts, we've really dug deep into the structure of the UN, explored the intricate web of specialized agencies, and even highlighted India's significant role in peacekeeping and its push for UN reform. Now let's step back and consider the UN's legacy,
Right.
its triumphs, its shortcomings, and the ongoing debate about its future.
Yeah, it's important to acknowledge that the UN, like any large and complex organization, has had its share of both successes and failures.
Right.
It's a product of its time, born out of the ashes of World War II.
Right.
And it's constantly evolving to address the challenges of a changing world.
Right. It's easy to get caught up in the day-to-day workings of the UN, but it's crucial to assess its overall impact and effectiveness.
Right. So let's start with the positives. What are some of the key successes that the UN can claim?
Despite its imperfections, the UN has undoubtedly achieved some remarkable things.
Yeah.
It's played a pivotal role in preventing conflicts, mediating disputes, and promoting peace around the world.
Right.
Think about the countless times the UN has served as a neutral platform for dialogue,
Yeah.
helping to de-escalate tensions and prevent situations from spiraling into full-blown wars.
I can imagine that's no easy feat, especially given the diverse interests and often conflicting agendas of its member states.
It's a constant balancing act requiring diplomacy, negotiation, and a deep understanding of the complexities of international relations. And sometimes it involves deploying peacekeeping missions to volatile regions, putting peacekeepers on the ground to help stabilize situations, protect civilians, and create conditions for lasting peace.
And beyond preventing conflicts, the UN has also been instrumental in promoting development and improving the lives of countless people around the world, hasn't it?
Absolutely. Think about the Millennium Development Goals, which we discussed earlier.
Right.
Those goals set back in 2000 targeted key areas like poverty reduction, education, health, and gender equality.
Right.
The UN played a central role in mobilizing resources, coordinating efforts, and monitoring progress towards those goals.
Right.
And while they didn't achieve everything they set out to do, They did make significant strides in many areas.
Right. I recall reading about the substantial reductions in poverty and child mortality that were attributed, at least in part, to the UN's efforts. Those are tangible improvements in the lives of millions of people.
Exactly. And now with the Sustainable Development Goals,
Right.
the UN is building on that progress, working towards an even more ambitious vision of a world free from poverty, hunger, and inequality.
Right.
It's a long-term commitment to creating a more just and sustainable future for all.
It's inspiring to see the UN taking such a long view and working towards such ambitious goals and beyond peace and development. The UN has also been a driving force in the codification and expansion of international law, hasn't it?
It has international law as the foundation of a stable and predictable world order.
Right.
It sets the rules of the game for how nations interact with each other, and the UN has played a crucial role in developing treaties and conventions that govern a wide range of issues, from human rights and environmental protection to trade and maritime law.
I think we often take international law for granted,
Yeah,
but it's really the bedrock of global cooperation and stability.
you're absolutely right. And the UN has not only helped to create this framework of international law, but also works to uphold it,
Yeah.
ensuring that countries respect their commitments and resolve disputes peacefully.
So the UN has a lot to be proud of.
It does.
It's made significant contributions to peace development and the establishment of a rules-based international order. But let's be honest, no organization is perfect. The UN has also faced its share of criticism and setbacks, hasn't it?
It has no organization operating on such a global scale. Dealing with such complex issues and navigating the diverse interests of so many nations can escape criticism. One of the most common criticisms leveled at the UN is that it's often slow and bureaucratic,
Yeah.
struggling to respond effectively to crises or implement its mandates as efficiently as it could.
I can see how that could be frustrating, especially when urgent action is needed.
It can be. There are layers of bureaucracy, multiple stakeholders to consult,
Right.
and often a need to build consensus among member states before taking action. All of this can lead to delays and a sense of inertia.
And then there's the issue of the Security Council's veto power,
Right.
which we discussed earlier.
Yeah.
It's a mechanism designed to prevent rash decisions and maintain a balance of power,
Right.
but it can also lead to gridlock and inaction,
Yeah.
especially when the interests of the permanent members are at stake.
The veto power is a double-edged sword.
Yeah.
On the one hand, it can prevent powerful nations from imposing their will on the rest of the world.
Right.
On the other hand, it can paralyze the Security Council and prevent it from taking necessary action, even when there's broad international support for it.
Right. It seems like the veto power is a constant source of tension and debate within the UN and beyond the veto power.
Yeah.
There's also the broader criticism that the UN is often dominated by powerful states and that the voices of smaller or less influential countries are not always given equal weight.
That's a valid concern.
Yeah.
The UN strives for equality and inclusivity,
Right.
but in reality, power dynamics inevitably come into play.
Right.
It's a challenge that the UN needs to constantly grapple with, finding ways to ensure that all member states have a genuine voice in decision-making processes.
It sounds like there's a tension between the ideals of the UN global cooperation, equality, shared responsibility,
Right.
and the realities of power politics on the world stage.
There is, and it's a tension that's inherent in any multilateral institution.
Right.
The UN is not a world government.
Right.
It's a forum for nations to come together to address common challenges and work towards shared goals. But those nations come to the table with different interests, different priorities, and different levels of power and influence.
So given these challenges and criticisms, what can be done to improve the UN and make it more effective in the 21st century is reform the answer.
Many argue that reform is essential if the UN is to remain relevant and capable of addressing the increasingly complex challenges facing the world today.
Right.
The global landscape has shifted dramatically since the UN was founded in 1945,
Yeah.
and the organization needs to adapt to keep pace with those changes.
What kind of reforms are being proposed? We already discussed India's push for Security Council reform, but are there other areas where the UN needs to modernize and adapt?
There are many. Some argue that the UN bureaucracy is too bloated and inefficient,
Okay.
that it needs to streamline its operations and prioritize its resources more effectively. Others call for greater transparency and accountability in UN decision-making processes, ensuring that they're more open, inclusive, and responsive to the needs and concerns of all member states.
So it's about both internal reform, making the UN itself more efficient and effective,
Yes.
and external reform, adapting to the changing dynamics of global power. and addressing the emerging challenges of the 21st century.
Exactly. And some even suggest the need for a new UN charter,
Wow.
a more fundamental overhaul of the organization's founding document to better reflect the realities of the 21st century.
Right.
But even without a new charter, there are many steps that can be taken to strengthen the UN and make it a more effective force for good in the world.
It sounds like there's a lot of debate about the future of the UN and how it can best adapt to the changing world. It's a complex and ongoing conversation with no easy answers.
It is, but one thing is clear. The UN remains a vital institution for global cooperation and problem solving.
Right.
Despite its flaws, it offers a platform for dialogue, a framework for cooperation, and a mechanism for collective action that is unparalleled in human history.
It's a reminder that despite its imperfections, the UN is still the best hope we have for a more peaceful, just, and sustainable world.
I couldn't agree more. It's an imperfect institution striving towards lofty goals.
Yeah.
But its mission remains as relevant and important today as it was when it was founded over 75 years ago.
Well said. This has been a truly fascinating and thought-provoking deep dive into the United Nations.
It has.
We've covered a lot of ground exploring the UN's history, structure, functions, successes, failures, and the ongoing debate about its future.
Yeah.
It's clear that the UN is a complex and multifaceted organization, but it's also an essential one, playing a crucial role in shaping the world we live in.
It has been a pleasure discussing this important topic with you, and I hope our listeners have gained a deeper understanding of the UN, its complexities, its challenges, and its enduring importance in a world grappling with interconnected global issues.
I hope so too, and I encourage everyone to continue learning about the UN, engaging in discussions about global issues, and finding ways to contribute to the collective effort to create a more peaceful, just, and sustainable world.
It's a collective effort that requires informed and engaged citizens. The future of the UN, and indeed the future of our world, depends on it.
Well, that brings us to the end of our deep dive into the United Nations. Thank you so much for joining us on this journey. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more insightful explorations into the topics that shape our world. Until next time.